Well, basically, it was a holding pattern. They went into the meeting thinking they might have the results of the negotiations that are going on in Brussels. But sadly, these just keep dragging on. And with a deadline approaching of next Sunday, the Bank of England just decided to keep things on hold because they just don't know which way it's going to go. We've seen that the pound is incredibly responsive to every nuance of the Brexit talks. And as things have looked like they're more positive and getting better, the pound has risen on the international markets. But that's only been a gentle rise. And tonight, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, is warning that the situation is pretty bad and the talks may end in no deal. And that's why the Bank of England wanted to hold fire, because a no deal will require emergency measures at a serious fiscal level.
So then talk about how the UK economy has been faring this year, especially as this clock is winding down with what's looking like a hard exit.
It's been a terrible year for the British economy because of the double whammy of COVID and the Brexit talks. So a survey by the OECD, the Organisation for Economic Development, just a couple of weeks ago, has forecast that Britain will be the leading economy with the worst economic hit from COVID by the end of next year. And that was based on the country being able to do a trade deal with the European Union, which now looks in serious doubt. So we're looking at a rather dramatic situation where if a trade deal cannot be done, the economy could suffer from a very long-term hit, perhaps up to 8% of GDP by the end of next year, which is incredibly serious.
So which aspects of the economy have really fared the worst, especially given now this latest tiered lockdown?
Yes, it's of course the hospitality sector, which has really been dramatically hit, and it's the Great British Pub, many of which were closing anyway in difficult economic circumstances, which has to close under the Tier 3 that you heard about in the news reports, which 38 million people in England and Wales are going to go into this upper tier, which means the pubs have to close, the restaurants have to close for in-person dining, they can only do takeouts. So it's the cultural section and the hospitality section which are feeling it especially hard.
And are there any areas at all of the economy that you see perhaps as a bright spot?
Well, again, we're hoping for a trade deal that will keep and perhaps even enhance our relations with the EU to keep our exporters busy. You know that well over 40% of Britain's exports go to the European Union, and it's exporters who are hoping against hope that a trade deal can be reached by Sunday.
So then, as you look at reaction to the Bank of England's governor calling a no-deal Brexit a greater threat to the economy than COVID, do you agree with that statement, and what could the recovery potentially look like?
Well, that statement by Andrew Bailey was based on a report by the London School of Economics just a couple of weeks ago, which had this dire forecast mirroring the OECD figures of a very long-term hit to the British economy. So I think his pessimism is shared by perhaps the Remainer side of the equation, and by that I mean people who voted to stay in the European Union. But on the leaving side, and this is a Leaver government, of course, the leading figures in the government voted to leave the European Union, they're much more optimistic that even in a no-deal scenario, the economy will recover in time, but nobody's pretending here that a no-deal combined with COVID is going to make for anything but a very, very difficult start to the new year.
Now, we have seen some promise with the vaccine rollout. How is that progressing so far?
Yes, Britain was, of course, the first country to approve the emergency use of the Pfizer vaccine, and we've had over 200,000 doses now distributed and being shot into people's arms. But of course, the effectiveness of it will rely on those people coming back in 3 or 4 weeks to get their booster shot to make sure the vaccine is effective. And it's come a little bit late in the day, though, as we've been discussing, to alter the path of the economic hit from COVID and Brexit, unfortunately. It's really a time now where this COVID fatigue that we've been seeing in Britain has unfortunately overtaken many of the measures that the government has tried to take, some of which have been found very confusing by the British people because they keep changing the exact level of lockdown that people have to observe. And so the vaccine rollout can't happen quickly enough.
All right.